Hey, this is Steve Horvath coming to you from the Greater Philadelphia Sports Show, and I'm here with Gary Loomis. Not any Gary Loomis that I just happened to find on the street. I'm here with the Gary Loomis. That's right, Loomis. I can read, too. But we're going to talk about, number one, we're going to talk about some fishing. Number two, we're going to talk about some rod stuff that not a whole lot of people know, probably including me. Gary, thanks for taking the time to sit here with us. I guess first thing is, what drove you into the rod business years and years ago? What did you want to make a better rod? Did you start building custom rods? What?
Well, that's a question that I'm asked quite often.
Well, I figured you'd have the answer to it.
It's a little bit of a story.
Right.
But, you know, I got out of the Navy in 1964. Mm-hmm. Somebody told me there was summer run steelhead in the Clamor River towards the end of May. Well, no, no, there isn't any. But I didn't know that the Fish and Wildlife had planted a return for the first year, 1965, return to May. I go down there, first day, I catch like 6 summer run steelhead. Now, I got to tell you something, Steve. I've never been on any kind of drugs, but this here hooked me.
I know the feeling of the juice.
I started fishing last of May, about 28th of May. I fished the rest of May, all of June, all of July, all of August till the 7th of September, and I missed 3 nights of fishing. I'd get on the river at 11 minutes to 5 and fish until dark. Mm-hmm. Saturdays, Sundays, holiday, 4th of July, the whole Marianne. I was hooked.
You got the monkey on your back when it comes to that stuff.
I want to tell you, it had to be worse than any kind of drugs you was ever on.
Right.
But my wife said as long as I wasn't in the tavern or chasing girls that I was just fine, so that's what I did and brought paycheck home on Friday. So when you fish that much and you fish only about a 2-mile stretch of this particular river, because this was right when they was coming out of the Columbia River, sea lice, absolutely right out of the ocean, and they were just absolutely upset. They just as soon break you off, send you home crying as anything else. They was absolutely tough fish.
And of course, by that time, you're getting to the point where you're able to call your shots where they're laying.
That's right. So I knew. Yeah, you're exactly right. I had fished all of the water enough times that I knew that they was here, and here, and you better go to the next hole, because if they're not there, there isn't any in the hole.
Right.
Well, I got to the point of time that I found out very quickly at the beginning in May, we're having a lot of snow melt. The water is a little murky, a little green, and you can use 10, 12-pound test line, which we used in the winter for steelhead.
Right.
But as the snow started to melt, the water started to get clearer, the main run of fish were still coming. And so I had to drop down and pound test of line to be able to get them to even bite.
Right.
I guarantee you, the lighter line you fish, the better presentation, and the better presentation, the more fish you'll hook.
Yep. And
you won't catch a fish that you don't hook. So as I started to drop down, I found out real quickly that if you took 10-pound test and held your hands out in front, you couldn't break it. But if you did this, you could break it easy.
Yep.
So it wasn't the pull, it was the shock. So what I needed was a long
different
shock
action
absorber.
rod.
Yeah, I needed a shock absorber.
Yeah.
So I went down and I bought a 9-foot 6-weight fly rod. Being a machinist, I drilled out the butt of the rod. I put an extension handle in it. I cut off 4 or 5 of the bottom guides, put spinning guides on it. Now I got a 10.5-foot light shock absorber to go fishing. Well, I immediately started fishing 8, never broke a fish off. Went down to 6, never broke a fish off. And so I'm fishing 6, and I mean, I'm catching a lot of fish.
Right.
Well, about in June or July, I guess it was, by that time I'm almost a legend on the river for catching fish.
Right.
I walked down one day, and there's 4 or 5 guys fishing the hole that there's always 2 fish in. And I just kind of sat there and I wait and talk and this type of stuff. And pretty soon I kind of get my moment, and I said, okay, make a couple casts. They said, sure. Well, first cast, hooked the fish. Down the river I go. Well, I got good enough that if I could get the fish in about this much water, I could put my boot up against the side and I could throw him up onto the bank about 10 feet, snap him off in midair, walk back up, tie another hook on, because 4-pound test, you don't want to,
Oh, no.
you know, retie every time.
Oh, absolutely.
Next cast, hook another fish, do the same thing, pick up the fish.
Gary Loomis. Gary Loomis is telling me a fishing story.
Picked up my 2 fish, started down the river. The guy says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going home." He says, "That's not what I mean."
Yeah, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Yeah. I mean, we come down. We take a half-hour off early at work. We come down here to beat you here to the hole. We thrash the hole to death, and you walk down, make 2 casts, catch 2 fish, and down the river you go.
Yep.
Now, what are you doing? Well, I felt kind of obligated to them because they was nice enough to let me catch the 2 fish that was in the hole.
Right.
And so I told him about the rod and this type of stuff. Well, this guy was a contractor, built houses. He says, "Make me a rod." Oh, I says, I don't make rods.
Right.
I just fish.
Right.
He says, no, I have to have one of those rods. Make me a rod. I says, no, I don't make rods. He says, well, let me buy yours. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I don't sell my wife. I don't sell my kids. I don't sell my dog. I'm sure not selling him my rod.
No.
Are you out of your, you know? He says, how much do you have in it? I said, well, I got about $35 in it that I bought it, and about 6 hours of labor getting it up. He says, I'll give you $100 for it. I says, you know, and I remember I was a journeyman machinist.
Right.
I was taking 97.20 take home a week, and he just offered me $100. I says, no. He says, I'll give you $150 for it. I says, no, I'm going fishing. I don't want to sell my rod.
But wait, Gary, the more money you make, the more you can fish.
Anyway, I said, no, I don't sell the dog. I don't sell my rod. He says, I'll give you $200 for it. I said, let me get the reel off.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is how I got into making rods.
You came to your senses.
So I took $200. I don't think I'd ever had $200 at one time in my hand. I went right to the store, bought another rod, went home, made it all up. See, I didn't miss that day of fishing.
Okay.
Made up another rod. I'm back the next day. I pull into where I always park. There's a car parked there.
He's got a buddy that wants a rod.
You're catching on.
Yeah.
I didn't catch on. I got out of the car, started the river. He said, hold it. You the guy that's selling rods? I said, no, not me.
You thought he was like the IRS or somebody showing up.
No, not me. He says, yeah, the guy that sells rods parks right here. I says, it's not me. He says, do you know Al Hellenberg?
Oops.
I says, yeah, I know Al Hellenberg. That's the guy. He said you're selling rods for $200 a piece.
Right.
I says, let me get the reel off of it.
Exactly.
So I went home. I did one thing better. Went out and bought 2 of them and went home and I taught my wife how to make them.
Ooh.
So she's the one that made all the great rods in all of those years.
You're a phony?
I'm a phony. She got to be one of the best rod builders in the whole world. She won contests all over, custom builder tests, you know, all over the United States. But so I designed the blanks and this type of stuff. But that's how I got into selling my very first rods.
Hon, you're building rods. There's a woman over here in that booth. We're going to teach you how to build rods.
There you go.
So I can fish.
Well, they got the you know, they're a lot more to the, you know, they got smaller fingers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
I'm clumsy.
Yeah, I just want to go fishing. You know.
I mean, can you imagine Shrek trying to build a rod? You know, I mean that's about the coordination I have. Fortunately, I have enough coordination to fish. And that's what Gary probably really wants to talk about is fishing.
Yeah.
So you live out on the left coast.
Yes, I live about 16 miles north of Portland, Oregon, right on Interstate 5. We're about 2 miles from the Columbia River, which is
getting his address, folks. I'm going to stalk him.
Which is the artery for all of the upriver fish.
I got his phone number. I've got Gary Loomis's phone number.
I'll give you my cell number too. Yeah. You need to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we were talking about some of the fisheries out there, and we were talking about Columbia River, and how has the Columbia River changed in the past 10 or 15 or 20 years? That you've seen it's to me the fishing is better now than it was from what I'm hearing.
Yes, it is.
Is it due to damming or lack of dams or?
Well, I think you know what it really is Army Corps of Engineers and all this, and the state and everything else have blamed the dams for the decline of the fish.
Right.
So I don't know if there's anything in the world that makes more money than hydroelectric.
Right, exactly.
I mean, you put in that dam 3 years, the dam's paid for, and it's all free money after that.
Right.
And so they really have a lot of money to put in hatcheries and do all of the things that they need to do. And so they've been blaming them for the decline for so many years.
Right.
And it's really been over-harvesting.
Right. And a lot of the like the salmonids and stuff like that, they've really benefited from the hatchery programs, especially like states like Alaska.
Yeah.
You know, that they have, you know, fish that are now returning to actual, like, coves that think they're supposed to spawn, where there's fisheries where there never were fisheries before.
Yeah, well, the problem of it is ocean over-harvest.
Right.
If they wouldn't have over-harvested them, it's kind of like the horn of plenty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like this, and the horn creates the plenty. We harvest the plenty, the horn creates the plenty. Well, what we've done over the last 175 years, if we've harvested so far down into that horn,
you got no horn left.
Yeah, we got 2 making 4, not enough. We need 4 making 8 million.
Right.
You know, and so we're starting to build that back up.
Right.
But they're starting to finally recognize it. But commercial fishing is so powerful that it's really hard to get selective harvest. Your bycatch, your bycatch is what's killing off runs that are threatened or endangered.
Absolutely.
They're killing them off because the bycatch that they're catching is those type of fish.
Right. Now out here, what we have in the last 15, 20 years is a complete resurgence of the striped bass. I mean, when I was a very young child, there were striped bass up the wazoo. I remember waking up in the back of my father's beach buggy with 30 and 40-pound stripers rolling on top of me. I'm like, hey, get this thing off of me. And then they disappeared, probably largely due to commercial fishing and stuff. And the other thing that I think has really worked for us out here is water quality in the spawning rivers and the spawning areas is really improving. Yeah. The striped bass fishing out here, as you probably know, it's off the charts phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I just saw your new world record that was just caught.
Yeah, well, no, I did not catch the world. Yeah, I caught the world record striper last year. No, I didn't. But it's here at the show. And that leads me to, you obviously know a whole lot about rods. And I have like a twofold question. Number one is, what do you think your common angler's biggest mistake with choosing a rod? Is it too short a rod? Is it too limber a rod? Too much backbone?
I think first of all, most of the people buy a rod, want a rod to go fishing.
Right.
And they really don't know what they want. But what they really got to look at is what they're going to fish for.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to fish crappie the same rod you're going to fish stripers.
Absolutely right.
So you really need to take a look at how you're going to fish, what type of bait or what type of lure, how you want this bait or lure to be presented, and then the length of the rod, the power of the rod, and the action of the rod.
Right. And now you being a machinist, you can relate to, and this is the same way I look at fishing tackle is my tools.
Yes,
you need the proper tool for the job.
Absolutely.
You try not to use a lathe as a drill press.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you need to look at the situations where you fish, and it's really okay to own more than one rod.
If you're going to fish for more than one fish and more than one type of fishing, yes.
Absolutely. And when people choose a rod, they get a little overcome sometimes. They go to a rack of rods, and here's I am 6, I am 8, I am X, I am this, I am that. What is the difference with all these IMs, and what's the modulus deal? What does that mean to your average angler, if anything?
Okay, that's a pretty good question.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Most of the time, let me tell you the difference between them and what they are and how they've created and that type of stuff, and then we can get to the answer.
Right.
You know, when graphite first came out back in the early 70s, it was revolutionary, and it was completely different than anything that that had came along before it.
I got suckered into buying a boron rod when they came out. Remember them?
I made a lot of boron rods, but you never seen one with my name on it.
No, no.
Now I don't have to
mine
apologize.
Mine had Johnny Morris's name on it. Imagine that.
Made a few for them. Made a few for everybody. But anyway, there's two things in materials. One is modulus,
right,
which is stiffness to weight,
right,
and one is strain rate, which is the strength of the fiber. How far that fiber can elongate before it fails.
Right.
Okay. Fiberglass is 6 million with 750,000 strain rate.
Okay.
The first graphite that came out was 33 million, almost 6 times stiffer per weight than glass, but it only had half the strength, 450,000 strain.
Okay.
So, one of the companies in those early years made their rods 6 times lighter in weight.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're looking at a fiberglass and a glass rod, and you can't imagine the difference.
But they had 100% breakage.
Right.
Because reducing the material by 6 times reduced the strength by 12.
And it makes it brittle.
It made it brittle. It just wouldn't elongate before it failed.
Right.
So the first rods I designed was only 3 times better than fiberglass with the same strength.
Right.
Okay, that was the ticket. Okay. Well, that material went on about 8 years. Now remember, they would love to have believed it, but they didn't design this material for us fishermen. They designed it for aerospace.
Okay.
Okay? And that's where they was trying to go. At that time, I worked really, really heavily with Boeings and Sandia, Los Alamos Lab, Fermilab, and this type of stuff, building parts for them and this type of stuff. Because if Boeing's build an airplane and the wing fell off, they'd be in a lot of trouble. If I build a fishing rod that breaks, I could just give them a new fishing rod.
To me, it would be just as important, though, being a fisherman.
But what happened was for the first 8 years, all they did is engineering and designing and didn't build anything. Well, I had 8 years of building composite parts up to that point. So that's why I had a lot of working with these type of people.
Right.
The very next graphite that came in was IM6.
Right, I remember that.
IM6. IM6 was intermediate modulus. IM6 was the 6th generation of graphite that Hercules had came up with.
Okay. Now, does that have does the modulus have anything to do with like the pressure that they actually make the fiber under?
Well, kind of, yes. It's mostly the heat.
Okay.
How graphite is made is they take oil and they crack it and they get the gasoline and kerosene and all.
It's a byproduct.
That's a byproduct. At the bottom is kind of a mess called polyacrylic nitrile. Okay? You see those drapes, the rugs?
Right.
They extrude it and they make fibers, and then they do different chemical baths, make orlons, racrons, rayons, and this type of stuff. That's where they come from.
Right.
Well, they take this and they run it through a series of ovens. One at about 300 degrees, another one at about 15, another one at 3,000 degrees. And they do a process called oxidizing, carbonizing, and graphitizing. And that orientates the carbon molecules in a direction. And this is how they make it. These fibers are only like 5 and 7 microns in diameter.
Okay.
Then they take these fibers and they turn around and pre-preg them into resin.
Okay.
We make sheets of graphite, unidirectional, usually put some type of a scrim on it to give it some integrity, and that's what we make our fishing rods
And then it's rolled onto a mandrel, right?
Rolled onto a mandrel. The mandrel is the inner mold. The outer mold is cellophane tape that we put around the outside.
Okay.
Pull the after we bake it, we pull the mandrel out, cut the cellophane off, sand it, and then we have the blank.
Right.
Okay. Getting back to what you said, the little bit of mixture of the precursor at the very beginning, and the temperature, and the graphitizing. How many times when we was a kid, we'd put some filings on deal, run a magnet under it.
Yep.
Okay, that was kind of graphitizing it, and that's exactly how this is done. And it's how these are formed,
which makes the strength
to stiffness. And so, if I made you a rod out of the first graphite, and you said, Gary, this is it. This is the best rod I ever fished.
Right.
As an engineer, blank designer, how could I make it better?
Right.
because you're telling me it's the right length,
Yep.
the right power, and the right action.
Right.
I can make it more efficient by making it lighter in weight.
Right.
Weight is the deterrent to performance. Put 900 pounds in the trunk of your car, you won't get 0 to 60 as fast, you won't get the gas mileage. Weight is a deterrent.
Right.
Okay. So what I need is a material that is stiffer per weight and stronger per weight,
Right.
so I can reduce the amount of it to give it a lighter blank to
Right.
increase the efficiency of the rod.
Right.
Diving board, pole vault, pole, fishing rod, all the same.
Right.
How much energy do we store to how much energy do we get back? You know you can jump higher off of a diving board than you can a platform.
Right.
Okay. So you load the rod of the diving board.
Yep.
It recovers. It throws you so far. It oscillates so long, and then it stops.
Right.
This remainder of energy that was not discharged is this oscillation.
Right. Now, does that oscillation, does that cut down on your cast distance? Does
Absolutely.
That creates the tension of the line
As
going
that
over the
line
guide?
is going through the rod, if
Right.
that tip is doing this, guess what the line is doing?
Oh, yeah.
It's going like that, too.
And I remember having some fiberglass rods as a kid that I'd make a cast and make it as it's going out. The
That's
rod
right.
would be so
and
limp.
and it's the weight, like I said. Now,
Right.
if I tie 50 pounds under the diving board,
Right.
I haven't changed the stiffness, only the stiffness to weight,
Right.
fiberglass. So now when I jump on it, it recovers me in the 50 pounds, doesn't throw me as far,
Right.
oscillates a longer period of time,
Right.
showing you it did not discharge as high a percentage of energy. So that's kind of the ticket of how a rod is. Now, we get back to your question on IM6.
Right.
In those days, you know, we really got some notoriety because of the performance of our rods very, very rapidly.
Right.
And the IM6 was a big deal. Well, I told everybody what our first graphite, which was 96% graphite, 4% glass, told them why it was better than glass. I told them why IM6 was better than the regular graphite.
Right.
But I never trademarked either one of them. So all of a sudden, we're getting in rods from the Orient
Right.
that the tips are this big.
Right.
They're IM6. They're 995, and our tips were this big around.
Right.
And they were, and Hercules that developed the IM6 was selling nothing out of the country.
Right.
So these were not IM6.
Right.
But there's nothing we could do about it because we didn't trademark the name.
It's my interpretation of IM6. Well,
Yeah.
not my interpretation, but their interpretation of your product.
I remember one company that said our 100% trademark graphite rods, trademarked 100% trademark.
And let me stop you right there. Can you make a 100% graphite rod, or it's got to have some type of fiberglass in it just to hold it together?
No, resin.
That's what I'm saying.
Resin, yes,
Resin.
it has to have resin. What we usually talk about is most all of your rods have to be somewhere in that, we'll say easily 40% resin, 60% fiber.
Okay.
Okay. You can go all the way down to 28% resin and still tie it together if you get enough pressure.
Right.
You know, gluing two boards together with Elmer's glue. If you put glue on them and push them together and let them set there, that's one thing.
Pop them apart pretty easily.
Put them together and put a clamp on them.
A whole different ball game.
All different ball game. Same thing in making fishing rods. So anyway, most of the time they're always talking about the fiber content. When I said it was 98% graphite or 96% graphite at the very beginning, that was 96% graphite fiber. And it was 4% glass.
Right.
And then the resin was still like about a 60-40.
Okay.
Okay. So, yes, you can do a 100% graphite rod, still having 30 or 40% resin.
Right.
But there's some things that happen when you do this. All those fibers, like in a 1/16 of an inch, there's 6,400 filaments. Very fine, like cobwebs. They're all laying this way. When I take a mandrel, it's about 3 times the thickness of the hair on your head, and I put it down, and I start to roll it up on this, I have a tendency to do this.
Okay, so the fibers want to split.
That's right. So then I end up with a thick wall on one side and a thin wall on the other. That's no good.
Right.
So there's ways to bias the material.
Now, is that how a rod develops a spine when it's being built?
Rod develops a spine mainly because The whole secret of the design of a blank is wall thickness to diameter to bending load.
Okay.
So, a bigger diameter, you're not going to bend it as much. You don't want it to bend. I mean, this old company that said, I get up in the morning and take the tip and touch the butt.
Oh yeah.
I just as well fish a hand line.
Yeah.
That's not a fishing rod.
No, you can slam it in a door, run it over with a car, put it through a garbage disposal. Yeah. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't make the best fishing rod you could go out and buy.
In fact, it doesn't make a fishing rod. So anyway, the rod has got to be progressive.
Right.
It's got to bend from the tip to the butt.
Right.
But if it's extra fast, moderate, slow, that doesn't, it's according to what you're going to use it for.
Absolutely.
What tool.
Right.
You don't use a hammer for the same thing as you use a screwdriver for. And it's the same thing in fishing. You need the right tool.
I've been known to do that now and then.
Well, I've got bigger hammers now and
exactly.
then.
That's what it is. Does this hammer work? No, let's get the big hammer.
Yeah.
And you know what? In a lot of my fishing, back when I was doing a lot of bass tournament stuff, it would be a bigger hammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, okay, I'm fishing pads now. I got to go to the heavier hammer.
Yeah.
I'm out here. I'm fishing a little worm around docks, little lighter hammer. So now we know all about modulus and stuff like that. Now, how does that all relate to your average angler when you go and wrap that all up?
Well, your average angler, it's really hard. It's really hard for them.
And it's a tough question because there is no average angler.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm kind of throwing you a tricky one here.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard for the average angler to look through the marketing and advertising of a lot of these companies. It's just really, really hard.
Right.
I would say, if I was going to learn to fish, I know that 5% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish.
Yes, absolutely.
So guess who I would go to find out how to fish and where to fish? From that 5% of the anglers.
Yeah, exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Somewhat the same thing in fishing rods. There's if you look around, you know who designs good rods, you know who builds good rods, you know who has a good reputation.
Right.
If you have companies that have had boron rods and now there's no boron rods, I kind of worry about those people.
Yep, exactly.
Ones that said graphite isn't a good material for fishing rods, I'd worry about that guy.
Right.
But the guys that have continually done good and great things and made great products, not just a whole bunch of mishmash.
Right.
This is where you probably should go to find good rods.
And what's really neat in the last, I'm going to say it started probably 15, 20 years or so ago, rod companies started developing rods that are technique specific. For your largemouth fishermen, you can go out and you can buy a rod that's already been designed as a drop shot rod. You can buy a noodle rod. Not only can you buy a noodle rod, but you can buy 17 different versions of a noodle rod if you're going to fish trout and salmon and stuff. You could do the same thing with surf rods and stuff. And I don't know what your feeling is on it, but I think that's a good start for an angler. If they already know that they want to try a specific new technique, that it's probably at least a step in the right direction for them.
You're right. At least they're going to go out with the right tool. If you're going to have brain surgery, you don't want the guy just to have a knife. And so if you're going to go out and you're really going to do it. Now, there's a lot of rods that are very in general.
Right.
Usually it's kind of the type of fish.
Right.
How they're going to bite. A fishing rod should cast a line or a lure correctly.
Right.
Hook a fish correctly. Bite a fish correctly. Land a fish correctly. And come home in the same amount of pieces that left it.
So
that's a good rod.
When something happens, I blame the rod, not me, because it won't be operator error.
Well, let me tell you.
There's a lot of operator error involved in fishing.
Yeah. Really, it was unjust to the fishermen when they came up with the unconditional no-fault warranty.
Right.
Because what that did is that told them that a lot of these companies have got to make their rods cheaper because they're going to have to replace them for all these people that don't take care of their product.
Right.
So it should be a 1-year warranty and insurance.
Right.
I mean, you buy a car.
You buy insurance.
You buy insurance.
You buy an extended warranty.
That's right. And it's not that we won't take care of them and do all of this, but we can't give them everything that they want
Right.
by figuring the rods aren't worth anything, that
Right.
they can just run over it with a truck and go get a new one.
Right. Well, I've got one more question for you, and this one should be an easy one. I know you didn't wake up yesterday, jump in a plane, and come to Pennsylvania to see Steve Horvath. You're here for a reason. What are you doing here at the Greater Philadelphia Sports Show this week?
Well, you know,
what do you got going on?
I like to go to shows. You know,
Right.
I didn't learn everything I learned over all of these years by sitting in a cocoon someplace.
Right.
These shows, you know, you get the top 10, 15% of the fishermen that really know what they're doing and know what they want for a tool to do this.
Right.
This is where you meet them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know anybody in this area unless I'm at this show
Right.
talking to the people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't find many owners of companies that are at shows.
Right.
And they don't know what their company is doing. They don't know what they're building or what they're designing or what they need to design.
And you own a company right now?
Yeah, I started another one.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yeah,
I heard Gary Loomis has got another rod company.
I couldn't. I tried to stay out. I really, really did.
It's kind of, you watch The Godfather at all?
No, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
I tried to get out and they pulled me back in.
Well, I started blanks a couple years ago, and I was just going to make blanks because they wanted the better performing stuff, and so I did that. And then they said, "Well, wait a minute now. There's only 5 or 6% of us that make our own rods.
Right.
We want rods." So we started making some rods, but there's some new materials out there. There's some new graphites. There's some new resin systems.
Now, is everything you're making fly rods right now?
Oh,
or?
No.
And what's the name of this company that you're keeping a secret from me?
Edge.
Edge Fishing Rods by Gary Loomis. That's right, the Gary Loomis.
We're just doing that for a few. Right now I'm here with TFO.
Yeah.
And I've designed TFO rods.
Right.
And that was kind of a thing from the owner of the company. He had asked me for a couple years to design rods for him. I mean, you probably have heard their fly rod.
Right.
I mean, it's great.
Well, that's why I asked you about the fly rods, because Temple Fork Outfitters, TFO, they're a pretty good name in fly rods.
They're a very good name in fly rods, and they got, Lefty Cray and Bob and Klauser and all those, the best of the best.
Right. Now, I interviewed Lefty Cray here last year.
Did you really?
Okay. And I didn't
lucky.
I didn't get, okay, I got as excited as when I saw Gary Loomis. But he told me I was a cheater.
Why is that?
Well, I said to Lefty, Lefty, I do a lot of fly rod fishing for striped bass. And I've got my own version of a Lefty Deceiver.
Yeah.
And what I call it the Steve's Deceiver. I take a pair of barbell eyes and I put a 4-inch black and red curly tail worm on it to be like a sandworm, and I toss that on a fly rod. Now, some people tell me I'm not really fly rod fishing. He said, if it doesn't have hair on it, you're cheating. If I'm throwing it with a fly rod.
I think it's called innovation.
Oh, I called it innovation. And Lefty Cray told me I was a cheater.
Well, lefties are
right.
I don't know. I've seen lefties throw plugs and bait and everything else. So,
yeah, but then he said, "Well, if I do that, I use spinning tackle."
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I was like, "Oh, come on! National TV and a Lefty Cray called me a cheater."
Let me tell you, I have fished a lot of fly rods with worms.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Worms?
Yeah, worms. Long fly rod that I could drop back down in, feed a little worm down in there to that big old cutthroat.
I do the same deal with like salmon eggs.
Yeah.
For small stream, I'll take the fly rod and I can just, almost like I'm flipping for bass, it bloop in the water. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. There he is. Lift up. And I feel like, like Ted Trueblood or somebody, but, it's just, me.
Well, like I said, I don't mind releasing them.
Yeah.
But I like to hook them, catch them,
absolutely.
and fight them.
So if somebody wants to go out and buy an off-the-shelf rod designed by Gary Loomis, Temple Fork Outfitters would be a great place to come and view some rods and stuff like that here at the Greater Philadelphia Sports Show.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have put, 40 years of rod design into these rods. There absolutely is no better buy in the industry than these. I have I have a signature series, the first one. mostly kind of standard graphite. And then we stepped up to the higher modulus, higher strain,
Right.
lighter rods, more sensitivity of the deals. But you know, $99 and $149. I got to tell you, I can buy 3 or 4 of those of what my ex company was. But they're good rods. They're great rods.
Right.
Or I wouldn't have put my name on them.
Gary, it's been an absolute delight talking to you for, I don't even know how long we've been here. My producer, Mikey, goes, hey, see if you can get 10 minutes out of the guy. I think we're well past 10 minutes. Gary, thank you very much for spending some time with me.
Thank you.
It's like I've known you forever. You're one of the nice guys of the fishing industry. I can tell you that.
I really enjoy it, and I've been very blessed to be in it. And it's really hard to get away from it. You know, retired 3 or 4 times. One time I lasted 6 days. You know, it's just. I'll be here until they check me out.
Hey, Steve Horvath coming to you from the Greater Philadelphia Sports Show. I just interviewed Gary Loomis. Gary Loomis.